Dear viewer, did you know there's an account that exists right now that yields 5 to 6 times more than long-term CDs, has guaranteed returns in some cases, does not have to be reported to the IRS, can be accessed anytime without penalty, and finally, lets you retire 100% tax-free? It's true. And yet, while these powerful accounts have been around for over 150 years, most people have never heard of them. That's because government places tight restrictions on the advertising of these accounts, even though they're 100% legal. As a result, less than 0.07% of Americans have what I call a 770 account set up, while more than half the population has a 401k or similar retirement account. The number 770, by the way, comes from the IRS legal code section that allows these accounts to exist. So then the question is, why have these accounts been kept so secret? I'll get to that in a minute, but first let's take a glimpse at who's been using the 770 account. President John F. Kennedy had an account. So did Presidents Taft, Cleveland, McKinley, Harding, and FDR. Roosevelt, in fact, held a significant portion of his wealth, 562,000, or over 7 million in today's dollars, inside his own 770 account. Even John McCain used his account to fund his electoral campaign back in '08. But it's not just the politicians of the world who have been privy to this account. Top bankers and Fortune 500 executives in the know have also been using the 770 account for years now, safely earning generous yields on their money, about 5.5% on average, while everyone else has been stuck chasing low-paying CDs, bonds, and dividends. In fact, this alternative account has proven so powerful, the Wall Street Journal recently declared the 770 has become a tax shelter for the rich. It gives the affluent tax advantages far beyond those available to middle-income people through a 401k or IRA. But it's not just rich people who have been taking advantage of this account, as we'll now see. With a master's degree in finance, you'd think Robert Andrews would have a leg up on most investors. Not so. In fact, as Robert told me over a round of golf, it seemed like every time he'd put in 5,000 or 10,000 in his 401k, the market would tank and he'd be no further ahead than before. I've gotten to know Robert pretty well over the last few months. He now makes his living as a financial writer, and at one time was even a financial analyst at Hewlett-Packard. But back in the year 2000, despite Robert's knowledge in the markets, the financial collapse took away a good part of his portfolio. And that's when he went looking for a better alternative. After a strenuous 10-year search, he eventually found out about the 770 account. It's great, Robert told me. Not only have I never lost a single dime in my account, but in 3 years it's already grown to over $30,000 tax-free. I've even used some of the money to buy gold and go away on a trip. It's incredible, I know. Now I have to admit, when I first heard about this story I was skeptical. It definitely sounded too good to be true. I mean, in all my life as a certified accountant and financial analyst, I'd studied just about every investment out there, and not once had I ever come across this unique account before. It wasn't related to stocks, bonds, CDs, precious metals, or real estate. And although these returns were all but guaranteed over the long term, and one company we found even guaranteed 4% returns, it wasn't an annuity either. That's great, because although these have become quite popular of late, they're not the bastions of security they're made out to be. So I dug headfirst into research. I read everything I could get my hands on. Books, old newspaper articles, government records, you name it. I talked to the wealthiest people I knew. I talked to experts. I even flew down the man widely considered to be the top expert on the 770 account here to Palm Beach so I could interview him in person. What I eventually discovered was that, yes, this account was in fact a legitimate wealth-building vehicle that had been used in America for over 150 years. And what's more, it ran totally outside the controls of the US government and Wall Street. You see, even though this account is 100% legal, You don't have to report it to the IRS. That's why it grows, and you can withdraw your money completely tax-free anytime you like. I believe that's one of the reasons the government restricts advertising on these secret accounts, because they don't make a dime off them. But that hasn't stopped politicians and presidents from profiting from these accounts, as we saw earlier. As you can imagine, I was getting excited. Here was a way to grow money that was better than Wall Street, tax-free, out of earshot from the IRS, and I couldn't lose a cent. But that was just the beginning. What I discovered next was even more intriguing. Disney, J.C. Penney, Ray Kroc, even the mighty Rothschild family. What do these great names have in common? They all started or grew their massive fortunes thanks to the 770 account. Let's take a short trip back to 1929. We're smack dab in the middle of the Great Depression, and 9,000 banks are about to go bankrupt. And J.C. Penney's fledgling chain of clothing stores is about to experience the same fate. Luckily, J.C. doesn't keep his money in the bank. He's got the bulk of his wealth stored in a 770 account, which, by 1929, has grown to over $3 million in value. But the key question is it still safe? Yes, not a single dime in James Cash Penney's account would be affected during the Depression. Thanks to his 770 account, Penney is able to save his business, and today the J.C. Penney chain has grown to over 1,000 stores and is worth $3.4 billion. But he's not the only one to rely on this little-known account. Ray Kroc used his 770 to start McDonald's. Doris Christopher, of Pampered Chef fame, used it to launch a $1.5 billion fortune. And Walt Disney was also a big proponent of the 770, using $100,000 from his account to fund Disneyland, after all the financiers he'd approached with the idea had refused him. In fact, it's even rumored the Rockefellers and Rothschilds, two of the richest families in history, also relied heavily on the secret 770 account to grow their family's fortunes. Why only rumors? Well, you see, because these accounts are private agreements between individuals and the 770 providers, it's very difficult to determine who does and who doesn't have a 770 account. That's another reason the rich love it. But still, I've found compelling evidence in old US congressional records that strongly suggest the Rockefellers used this account. Take a look. Here's the cover page of this US Congress document. Although I can't show the 38-page report here in its entirety, it does go on to describe how the family has links into at least 6 separate 770 provider companies. And what about the Rothschilds? Well, the fact that one of the family members, Nathan, actually opened up a company providing 770s in 1824 should tell you enough. As you can see, the 770 is a powerful account that's been used by some of the world's richest to amass some of the greatest fortunes ever seen. But still, you may be wondering, if this account is so great, why haven't I heard about it before? Very good question. You see, even though government restricts advertising on these accounts, the companies who provide these accounts can't use words like investments, savings, or retirement plan to describe them, even though that's what they really are. That's only part of the reason. In fact, the real reason may leave you a little mad, a bit ticked off. There's a very good reason you've never heard about the 770 account before. That's because Wall Street doesn't want you to know about it either. And neither do the big banks too, for that matter. Now, even though this is an investment account, the Wall Street Journal is on record as saying it's better than 401ks and IRAs, the majority of Americans don't know it exists. Why? Well, here's a clue. I just got off the phone with an insider who works in the 770 industry. This person has worked firsthand with one of America's biggest financial gurus, a name you'd instantly recognize, as well as several employees from Goldman Sachs and other big investment banks. And this is what she told me. No one in Wall Street has their money in stocks, and many of them are invested instead in 770 accounts. Now consider what this means. Here are the same investment professionals who've been telling us for years to buy stocks, and meanwhile, They're all putting their money somewhere else. It's ridiculous. Can you imagine the outrage this would create if most people found out about this? That's why you'll never hear your broker mention this investment to you, no matter how much money he or she has parked into it. In fact, here's what Jason Rink, an ex-VP at Chase Bank, told us when we recently interviewed him.
It's a miracle anyone knows about these accounts at all. You have to realize there's a lot of money at stake here. It's not a mistake the talking heads on TV aren't talking about these accounts, the real strategies of wealth.
And while the mainstream media hasn't picked up on these accounts yet, they have started to realize something doesn't smell right on Wall Street. Consider, according to a recent Morningstar study, out of 2,057 equity managers investigated, 51% owned zero stake in the funds they manage. And here's another story off the wire. One employee from Merrill Lynch, who I won't name here, just got caught in a series of private email exchanges calling the stocks they recommend pieces of junk and crap. It's enough to make your stomach turn. These are the investment professionals most people depend on for their retirements, for their future well-being. Is this the type of person you want to put in charge of growing your family's fortune? Certainly not me. But if you can believe it, it actually gets worse. Your banker is in on it too. Here's the thing. While many people more or less suspect brokers engage in unscrupulous activities, like Bernie Madoff and MF Global, I'd wager the majority of Americans don't think of their local banker as someone who's corrupt. But the truth may startle you. Consider, while you're getting paid an average of 0.12% in your savings account right now, the national average across America, bankers are quietly taking the same money, putting it away in their own secret 770 accounts, and earning as much as 37 times more on your money, and they get to keep it. I don't know about you, but last time I went to my bank, no one told me about this special account, a way I could just as easily earn up to 30 to 40 times more interest on my money. It's sickening. This is stuff people need to know right now, especially those nearing retirement who've seen their investment income stripped away to nothing thanks to the Fed's crippling zero interest rate policy. In fact, because of lackluster yield, many people are now taking dangerous risks with their capital, and the results will prove to be even more disastrous in the months and years ahead. Now I understand if you're thinking, yeah, but I'm getting more than 0.12%. I have money locked away in a one-year CD that pays 1%. That's great, but three things about this. One, you're still getting screwed 400% to 500%. I'm currently earning a 5.5% yield in my 770 account. And remember, this is safe money, which if history is any indication, is all but guaranteed to go up. Two, don't forget taxes and fees. For example, a 5.5% 770 account, which already includes fees, can be equivalent to a mutual fund that averages a 9.2% return. That's considering a 30% tax bracket and 2% fees, which is only half the 4% fee Bloomberg reports as being the average for mutual funds. And lastly, unlike CDs, treasuries and the like, the money you store in a 770 account is not locked up for months and years. This is important. It means that if an emergency or new opportunity comes up, you can access the money in your account fast. Plus, you don't have to pay any penalties to withdraw your money. Compare that to 401ks, for example, where you can only withdraw a maximum of $50,000 and you also get slapped with 10% early withdrawal penalties. That's why it's so important you get this information today. This account could literally save the retirement of thousands and even millions of Americans today. I'll show you how to open an account soon, but first, there's just one last thing about bankers I have to share with you before we move on. Take a look at the following chart. What you're looking at in green is the amount of money Bank of America has stored in its own 770 account. 18.5 billion. To put that in perspective, that's almost 20 times more than the money they spent on their 2.1 million square foot headquarters in Manhattan, the second highest building in New York City, located just a couple of blocks south of Times Square. And in fact, when you crunch the numbers, you'll find Bank of America has got more socked away in its 770 accounts than the total amount it cost to build their entire 5,600 branch buildings across America. Incredible. But they're not the only ones putting away monster sums of money in secret 770 accounts. Chances are your bank is doing it too. Consider this. Citibank has $4.5 billion hidden away in their own 770 account. JP Morgan Chase has $9.8 billion. And get this, Wells Fargo has over $19 billion invested in 770 accounts. Twice as much as they have invested in all their bank premises. All told, over 4,000 banks have $140 billion invested in 770 accounts. And again, you're not seeing a single red cent of these higher returns credited to your account. All you get is the pesky 0 to 1% returns they throw our way. Now let me ask you a question. Am I the only one who finds it crazy that these bankers prefer stuffing money away in 770 accounts rather than in their own banks? I hope not. And while it may seem absurd, I actually can't say I blame them. You see, according to FDIC records, there have been 499 bank failures in America since the year 2000. No wonder these bankers don't even trust themselves. That's why one CEO from a Midwestern bank told his advisor 770 accounts were the bank's best performing investment and that he'd ordered his executives to put into this account the maximum amount that the laws and regulators would allow. While our source didn't reveal this specific CEO's identity, we did try contacting one Midwestern bank CEO. However, as soon as he heard what we wanted to discuss with him, he refused to talk. Go figure. But big bankers and the crooks on Wall Street aren't the only ones who've discovered this account. Corporate America has gotten in on the action too. Walmart, for example, takes advantage of the 770. So does GE, Comcast, Disney, Johnson & Johnson, Harley-Davidson, Gannett, Verizon, and nearly 700 other Fortune 1000 companies. In fact, Walmart believes so much in this idea that at one time they had over 300,000 separate corporate versions of these accounts. Amazing. Now you might be wondering why these big companies love this account. These companies have some of the largest executive payrolls around. They have absolutely gigantic retirement packages to fund. Comcast CEO Brian Robert, for example, is owed a $223 million pension over the course of his retirement. But to meet these obligations, these companies haven't found a better way to grow their money and make sure it's there when they need it than by investing in the 770 account. You don't have to be a Fortune 500 executive, banker, or Rockefeller, however, to take advantage of this plan. In fact, it doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, old, young, married, or single. Practically every person in America can take advantage of a 770 account. Here's how you can do it.